Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Walking Dead. So this week's episode pretty much dealt with what was going down with Hilltop. I was actually surprised because at first it cut away to Alexandria for a second. I was like, oh wow, really? We're going to bounce back up? I was like, oh, I thought this episode was going to be purely Hilltop related. Turned out to be. It's just they need the whole Enid and Carl situation to kind of like transfer over to Hilltop, which I thought was kind of interesting. There's that conversation between him and Michonne, because as we know, Carl is one of those few people who's just kind of like, screw this situation. I mean, he's not alone in it because everyone's like, oh, the situation sucks. But the most vocal about it is Rosita. Well, not really vocal, but secretive about it is Rosita. But Carl's probably been most vocal about like, yo, the situation sucks. Like, Dad, you're wrong. Even having a conversation with Michonne, and Michonne's like, yes, I think your dad is wrong, but I don't know that he is, because she's trying to figure it out herself, because even she's trying to come to terms with it. Which I like that moment where it's just like Rick was going to just kiss her cheek, but she's like, nah, and just like kiss him on the lips, kind of, I guess, to reassure him, because he kissed her on the cheek because I guess he felt, because they have such a difference of opinion about this whole Negan situation. I guess that was her way of trying to comfort him, to let him know, like, hey, we're on the same side. We're good. Don't think that we're at odds or whatever. That I have a problem with you. That I'm mad at you or anything. We're good. I think that's what that's supposed to represent. But yeah. I mean, going back to the main focus of the episode, which this episode, once again, in case you forgot from last season, you got reminded this episode just how much of a turd Gregory is. And oh my god, like a combination of a coward and an asshole, because it's like, oh, why are you burying these bodies here? They have to be burned. He's not even recognized. He's like, oh yeah, you should know that. Jesus had to be like, yo, Sasha isn't with us. She's actually from Alexandria. He's like, oh, I ain't got time to remember other people's names. It's not just them. It seems like even amongst his own people, he doesn't even remember people's names, because he was like, oh yeah, that particular lady who's making food was like, oh, she'll give you something before you leave. And Jesus had to correct him. It's like, that's not her name. Still getting Maggie's name wrong and everything. But it's like, Jesus is like, yo, they gotta stay here, because the doctor's like, Maggie needs to stay nearby so he can keep up with her condition. Like, the baby's okay and everything. Basically, it was like a separation between the placenta and her uterus. There was a little bit separation. It's come upon by intense, what was it? Not stress or whatever. Something kind of triggered it, which we kind of know what kind of. Well, I mean, she was already kind of in pain before, but I'm sure Glenn's situation just aggravated it even more. But he's like, she needs to rest. But Gregory's like, no, because it's like, if they come here and find her here, they're going to be like, oh, put two and two together. Like, oh, we worked with them to kill those saviors at the outpost. Which he's like, we can't have that. Plausible deniability, which is like, if you want to get technical about it, you can lay a lot of the blame on Rick and his group for doing what they did. But at the same time, it's like, you can blame Hilltop, more particularly Gregory. I mean, because he kind of sent them in blind, because they thought they were just dealing with one outpost. But in their defense, Gregory legitimately only thought it was that group. He didn't know there was anyone outside of them. I mean, now, Maggie informs them, like, their numbers are far greater than what you saw at the outpost. But just how much of a dick he is. And the fact of the matter is, Sasha was like, she's pregnant. And he's like, well, that's her fault, and picking such a stupid time to get pregnant. Why would you get pregnant? Oh, you're an idiot. Obviously not his exact words, but he might as well have just blatantly said that. And it leads to an interesting conversation where Sasha is like, Jesus, like, you're a more reasonable dude. Why don't you take position? He's like, I'm not the leader type of dude. She's like, what do you want? He's like, I just want to help people, And it's like, Sasha's kind of like, that might not be good enough anymore. Because the whole situation, because Maggie said something I really appreciate. She's like, the fact is, Gregory might be an idiot, but he's also a coward. And being a coward is a lot worse than being an idiot. I'm sure Glenn can attest to that from back in season 5, the whole situation with Nicholas. That was kind of proof of just, I mean, granted, that kind of came back to screw him over back in season 6. But that wasn't really more so cowardice, I guess. That was more so like him just, being caught in a desperate situation, but also because it's like, hey, I got to pay for all the people I've sacrificed and used in the past. But nevertheless, moving on. And it's just, there was even an attack sent by the saviors to kind of be like, hey, put them in, quote unquote, put them in their place. Really, Simon ended up showing up. I can't help it. Just every time I see Stephen Ogg, I just can't help but think. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing his last name right, but I say it like that. Ogg, Stephen Ogg. Just obviously you can't help but think Trevor. I mean, it's just like it's just like every time he speaks, Trevor, you're such a douchebag in the show, but I still love you, Trevor. Nevertheless, it's like, oh, we were going to come save you, but you kind of handled that yourself. I mean, really, it was like a 3-person team. I mean, other than them, we saw like 2 other people like kind of interfere. We saw Gregory looking out his window and go back in. Basically, they set off a fire, broke down the front gate, let a whole bunch of walkers, and they drove a car in there with basically playing loud music. I even like the lock to the trunk in the back has like it was a metal lock that had a middle finger. I appreciate that touch. But nevertheless, it was Jesus and Sasha and Maggie kicking ass. It's like Jesus got some real good moves on him, like doing some like flying kicks and stuff like he pretty good with that footwork. I just can't help but notice. I was like, I don't ever remember that popping up at all last season, did it? I mean, not that I can remember like seeing him like really handle himself like hand-to-hand combat wise. But still, that was just kind of interesting. But him and Sasha kind of kicked ass, and you had Maggie pulling up with a tractor and running over the car to kind of shut it up. So, but like I said, you saw like 2 other people from Hilltop really helping. Everyone else just kind of like just completely ignoring that situation. There was literally like 6 people in that entire scene. I know, like, I'm not trying to nitpick. I just find it interesting. I mean, it's probably one of those things where it's like, why, we don't need to film all these people helping out or doing whatever. It's like, yeah, people were also doing stuff in the background. You just didn't get to see it. So that's how I'm choking it up. But, just like I said, this episode pushed it more and more, just his douchebaggery. There's that conversation he had with Sasha, and Sasha's like, yo, Gregory, we gotta stay here. And he's like, well, maybe we can have this we'd have to probably have this conversation. She's like, what can I do to make us, at the very least, let Maggie stay and I will go. Or I'll try and work off my debt here. And then he's like, oh, well, that's a conversation we'll have to have one-on-one. She's basically like, screw you. He's like, what? Oh, you wound me. You think I would think like that? You know what? Better yet, just don't get nothing from the lady and just get out of here. It's just like, you're such a douchebag. Because you know that's exactly what you meant, you piece of crap. And then later on when Simon comes in and is like, yo, getting the lay of the lands and everything, being so like coy about it. I guess the one thing he has going for him is because he's such a coward, he's so good at lying most of the time. And then the fact is like, yeah, did you hear about our brothers and sisters getting killed at the outpost? What? They're dead? Oh my goodness, I can't believe it. Being such a kiss ass to the point he's like, oh, the fact is we were able to handle ourselves only because of you. We kind of learned by your example. It's like, so in a way, you kind of saved us. And Simon's kind of sucking it up. He's like, yeah, you're right. I guess, he's just like, thank you, Gregory. You're such a good guy. I even love the fact is that, Stephen Ogg does such a good job with Simon because he's got that charming air about him a little bit to a certain extent. I don't know what it is. He's kind of likable. I even like the fact that he's like, oh yeah. He's like, okay, you can pass it. Like Gregory's like, oh, could you pass this on along to Negan? That we kind of understand everything. We are keeping them. He's like, oh, you don't got to worry about that. Think of me as your Negan. This is what Negan wants. So kind of let it fly. And then Gregory's sitting there like, he's like, oh, is there anything else that we should know about? He's like, no. But then Gregory's kind of getting a little squirmish, and then he's like, Gregory. And he's like, and shows him to the closet where Jesus had hidden Maggie and Sasha. I was like, the moment he was kind of getting all squirmy, I was like, don't you dare, Gregory, don't. And it's like, you're leading. I was like, you piece of crap. And I was like, he's like, you suck. He opens the door, and there's nothing in there. And I love Jesus' smug face being like, yeah, got you, you son of a B. And I don't know why I just said it. I'm trying to cut back on my cursing in these, so that's one. But just the smuggest look on his face. It's like, I knew you were a piece of crap. I love his technicality. It was like, no, you told me to hide them in a closet, so I hid them in your closet. So what difference does it make? I was the only reason why you wanted them to be in that closet was so you could sell them out. Because another thing to keep in mind too is Maggie is supposed to be dead. Last episode they set it up to be like, oh yeah, Maggie died. I mean, whether or not Simon would have brought that up to Negan or not, I don't know. But them being there would have just escalated the problem even more, because it's like, it would cause problems for the people of Hilltop. Nevertheless, I love the fact is that he's offering. Well, I forgot what it was that he ended up offering Simon, but Simon's like, I don't like that. It tastes like ashtrays. It's like me, I'm more of a gin man, but Negan loves this stuff. So he's like, you know what? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this. I won't say that I'm gonna remove your name from the equation, just put my name there and be like, okay, let me, I kind of want the credit for this one. And so he's like, okay, and he ends up picking up the rest of the box. He's like, okay, so Gregory, can you put that one back? And Gregory gets in there. He's like, okay, well, let me rephrase that. Put that back, period. And ends up taking his liquor, and Gregory's super pissed about it and everything. And then you have Jesus being like, you know what, Gregory, you're not in charge anymore. I'm not taking charge or anything. It's like, we're going to be a big, happy, dysfunctional family. So it's going to be more so a democracy of everyone working together. But it's kind of like, which to me, I know that's going to backfire on them some way, because it's just like, you can't trust Gregory. Like I said, it's just someone who's a very cowardice by nature, will come back to bite you in the ass in some shape or form. And him, I mean, we've already seen that where he tried to sell Maggie and Sasha out, which once again, he didn't think that through, because if he did sell them out, it'd be like, oh, so you were trying to harbor fugitives, people that were for Alexandria. Oh, so you were in fact, okay, let's get Negan down here and let him have a conversation with you. It's like, I don't know, like he didn't think that through, because it still like would have screwed you over in the end. But nevertheless, luckily everything did work out, and it's just kind of like Jesus kind of makes this kind of vague statement like, oh, Gregory's kind of there since the beginning, even before Jesus got there, and he's like, but he can't imagine anyone else taking a spot till now, which they were like, who are you talking about? And then he's just kind of like, oh, I'll kind of tell you later on. So I'm like, I'm wondering, is he talking about Maggie or Sasha? Part of me was kind of like, oh, you mean both Maggie and Sasha? But I guess because really Maggie, because she's the one that was kind of dishing out orders, like in the episode, telling the other guys to help with the gate and whatnot. She's the one that kind of took charge, because she's the type of leader that was just kind of like, hey, she went out there and kind of handled the business herself. Kind of similar to Rick. Rick wouldn't put, like, even if he tells someone to do something, he wouldn't, sit back and just stay on his high horse. He would kind of be out there too. Just kind of a little, I mean, even Ezekiel, we kind of see him kind of out in the field a little bit too. So it seems like Gregory's currently the only, I mean, and even in the case of Negan gets out there. He doesn't stay in his throne room all the time either. So it's kind of crazy when you have to when you kind of look at Gregory and you're kind of like, man, you're actually worse than Negan. I mean, at the very least, in his own twisted way, Negan has principles. I mean, they don't always make sense, and he's just not the most logical person. He does things his own way, but at the same time, he has a little more valor to him in that sense. Not like he's a very valorous person. I don't even know if that's a word, but you get the point I'm making. It's like, because Gregory's kind of scum because of that. But the fact of the matter is, I love him because he's such a scumbag. I love him because of that. Because you need scumbag characters just to just because they're very entertaining. And Gregory was very entertaining, because every time in this episode, I was like, oh, you suck so much, dude. Especially that closet thing, dude. I was like, dude, you suck so much. But there is a little side deal going on between Sasha and Jesus that are keeping Maggie out of it. It's the fact is, hey, do you think you can find out where Negan lives? Which we've kind of, well, I assume it's where Negan lives, the whole compound where the whole third episode took place. I'm guessing that's his main compound. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. I mean, I assume it is, but I mean, we'll just kind of have to wait to see. So, but because he has that special room and everything there at the facility, and it just seems like his mainstay, especially because there's all those people bowing. But maybe that's kind of like a stop-off point. So, I mean, but that's beside the point, because it doesn't really matter. I mean, it does. It eventually will. But it's like that's kind of their side thing, and they're keeping Maggie in the dark. Because Sasha doesn't know how Maggie would react. Because there's a part of her that might think Maggie would be okay with it, but she wants Maggie to focus on the baby rather than revenge. And then, but there's also the kind of point where she's like, I guess she also feel like Maggie would be more reluctant because of what happened to take any action. Because it seems like I said, when you look at everyone, you look at Sasha, you look at Carl, you look at Michonne, like a lot of people are very against this deal. It's kind of like, no, screw that, let's fight back. I mean, Daryl at one point was kind of like that back in that episode, but it seems like Negan might have broken him. Not unless Daryl's just biting his time until he can make his move. I mean, just have to wait and see. But and speaking of Carl, he pointed out some stuff this episode, like the fact of the matter is, like I mentioned earlier, on his whole position about thinking Rick is wrong about this whole situation, but also just like he made sure to watch what happened to Glenn and Abraham because he wanted to not forget. He knew he needed to see it, to keep it in the back of his head when it came time to kill Negan. But it wasn't even for their sake. It was more so for his, just because it's not like revenge for them per se. It's just because the satisfaction of just killing a guy that you hate. That's what it came down to. It's not for revenge for two comrades that you lost. It's more so for hate you harbor for him. So I guess you could also look at it because of what he did to Carl, like almost putting Rick in that position, like to use him as, like, say, cut off your son's arm. I guess it's because, in a way, Negan made him feel weak and powerless. Because it's like he's never been in a position like that before. Like, none of them have. That's why this is kind of a new position, because it's always been like, hey, they kind of run things. It's like, especially he's always had his fathers to kind of lead the charge. And I guess that's another thing, too, because it's like, it almost seems like Carl kind of looks down on his dad now. I mean, because in the beginning, him and his dad always had problems, but it wasn't until like the little bit later seasons where they kind of came back together. Especially now, it seems like he's kind of losing a little respect for Rick, because it's like, you're an idiot about this. It's like, we should kill Negan, we should stand up and fight, not accept this. And that's the thing, though. That's kind of the question. Should you accept it? Would you? Would you not? Like, in a situation like that, after what Negan did, seeing all the men he has, I wouldn't I'd kind of side with Rick in this, but there is a part of me that I understand where everyone's coming from. Is because after everything they've lost, and it's like, we can't give up with a fight. We can't just submit. Like I said, a good plan is to, hey, everyone join together. I've thrown that out there before, but it's like, they don't know. The only other people who they're aware of is Hilltop. They don't know about the Kingdom and how many other people are out there. But I mean, the question is, even with all three places combined together, will they ever have the numbers to match Negan anyway, So, not unless they turn some of Negan's men on him, which, I mean, it seems like you could easily do that with someone like Dwight. But, and speaking about that whole situation, since I got talking about Carl and everything, it kind of brought me back to something else douchey that, Gregory did. So apparently, just being a dick isn't enough. He had to go the extra mile by saying like, saying something to Maggie, being like, oh yeah, the saviors can be civil, and basically almost spitting in their faces, because he's the one that kind of pushed them on the path to doing that. And granted, they accepted, they offered and everything, but sure, that's one thing. But it's also because it's like, trying to make it seem like they're not animals too, that they didn't just kill two people from the group. So I guess, that just pissed her off, because it's like, okay, don't sit there with that kind of smug, condescending statement after I've had to have my husband buried. Screw you. But he also took the watch that Herschel gave to Glenn that she left on his grave, which is just kind of like, he's like, couldn't leave it out there in the rain, such a good watch, which I'm actually surprised initially, because I was so sure that Maggie was going to keep it anyway. I was actually surprised that she left it on his grave. I was like, aren't you going to take it? Because it's like, that's a family heirloom, because Herschel gave it to Glenn, and, I was sure that she would keep it to pass on to their child as a means of, especially because it's like, it's a reminder of Glenn and her dad. But eventually later on in the episode, she's kind of like, because the mindset that Hilltop has is the reason why they burn bodies is because they don't need reminders of the people they've lost, because they have themselves. It's like, as long as they're alive, that person's memories will always live on, and so you'll need objects and stuff to remember them, which is why she kind of gives the watch to Enid later on, which I find it funny that the whole situation with Enid, that she ended up putting the balloons on their own grave. Had to show support for Glenn, because it's like, Glenn and Maggie are the reason why she's still there, because like, Glenn's the one that kind of convinced her to come back, not to run away anymore, to kind of make Alexandria her home. So she was paying respect, but she ended up putting it on her own grave, and Maggie's like, I didn't have the heart to tell her that it was her own grave, which is kind of like, that was kind of the most lighthearted aspect of the episode, because it's just kind of, little parts of the episode are just kind of like, it's not, like I said, not nearly as depressing. It's a little depressing, but it's like, my heartbreak over Glenn and Abraham, I've been able to settle it over the past couple episodes, so I'm good now. So it doesn't hurt me. It still sucks, but I agree with what Sasha said. It's like, it doesn't feel right. And then we have how the episode actually ends with Jesus kind of sneaking aboard the truck that's leading to Negan's compound. And I love he kind of does kind of like a little middle finger thing of like the drink that Simon said, like, Negan would like. Jesus takes a little sip of it and pours the rest of it out. And then lo and behold, he finds someone else is in the back of the truck with him, Carl, which is like, okay, this is, I was kind of halfway expecting. I was halfway expecting to see Carl be the one to jump in. I wasn't expecting Jesus to do it. I've pretty much figured Carl, but I was like, oh, I guess it's just Jesus back there. And then so Carl was like, oh, there you go. So that's going to definitely be interesting when we see him come back. Everyone's going to be like, okay, where the hell is Carl at next episode? And it's like, what are they going to do when they get to the compound? Are we going to, like, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. I mean, you see kind of a smile on Jesus' face, like, this kid's got moxie. The fact is that he's sneaking back here. He didn't ask some question like, oh, what the hell are you doing here, kid? Or something like that. He's just kind of smiling. So it's kind of like, it's going to be interesting to see how things play out next episode. I mean, because the fact is that Carl wants to take this. He's, like I say, he's kind of in the same situation with Sean last episode. She was learning how to kind of shoot with that gun so that she could take a shot at Negan. And it's like, that's why Carl went to Hilltop, on the chance that he would come across. I mean, just on the chance, it's like, okay, he was kind of coming there because he's like, he went with Enid, not for her sake or whatever. He didn't come after her for that sake, her sake, you know, to keep on, because he did say, like, I'm not going to save you anymore. Which I'm sure there's a part of him that did it because of that, but his main reason was for the opportunity that, like, hey, there's Hilltop. It's at least one group that I know that Negan might stop by to kind of get his tributes from. And then he ends up, you know, Negan's not there. So, but it's still an opportunity. Even if Negan's not there himself, he can, you know, do what he's doing. So, like I said, very interesting episode. Just like I said, the biggest thing you can take away from the episode is Gregory's a douchebag. You already knew he was a douchebag, and they solidify it a little bit more. I think the actor, I think I just heard his name, it was Xander Berkeley. I've seen him in different stuff from time to time, so this is kind of my first time really learning his name. I'm almost half tempted to look up Gregory and see what kind of character he was in the comic book. I really need to read a comic book because I've actually heard people talk about the fact that, like, they don't think the show is bad or anything. They just like the comic book a little more. They just think it's kind of interesting when you read the comic book and watch the show and just see what kind of different directions they take. Like I said, currently I know some of those directions vast. There's like a lot of stuff that, like, I'm just finding it interesting from the little bit I do know, because it's like that is drastically different because that character's still alive currently and that character died a long time ago in the show. That's kind of, like I said, it makes you wonder why they decided to do that. Why not be a little closer in the comic book? It's like, hey, who am I to? I'm not a showrunner. I'm not a show creator. I'm not a writer. So it's like, who am I to really say anything on that part? So very interested to see where everything goes. Next episode is going to be crazy. Maybe we'll kind of get a look back at the kingdom. I mean, because like I said, we've kind of gotten to that point now where we officially seen where everyone is. Like I said, I'm still curious about the whole Tara situation because we haven't seen hide nor hair of her since her and the other runner dude went off to get extra supplies. It was going to be like a 2-week thing. Now that I think about it, because it's only been like, by the time the last week's episode happened, it had been a week, right? Maybe? I can't remember. And like, plus, like I brought it up before too, Tara still doesn't know about Denise, so it's going to be like blow after blow, because it's like, oh yeah, learning about Denise, then Glenn, and then Abraham, and it's just going to suck all around. Plus, you got the whole situation about Rosita getting her bullets made. It's like, I'm very curious, like I said, because they took a little detour in Alexandria in this episode. I mean, it might pick up with Rick and them kind of going after supplies. I mean, because they have no guns now. They have to do everything with blades and stuff like that. Or like I said, might take a look at the kingdom. Because like I said, we kind of at this point taking a look at everyone except for Tara and the dude that's with her. So other than that, so it could easily be like, hey, we get to look at them. But at this point, it's kind of like we could flip-flop around everywhere, kind of seeing where everyone, because the entire main group is separated. So, but really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.